Welcome to today's Aspirational Healthcare Employers Group. And I'm excited to have a discussion with everybody today about the importance of leadership and culture when it comes to creating productive and healthy teams. And my guest presenter today is Jenni Catron, who's a fellow member of the Forbes Leadership Council, which is where I met Jenni. She's a leadership coach, author, and speaker. Her passion is to cultivate healthy leaders to lead those organizations. She speaks at conferences and events nationwide, seeking to help leaders develop clarity and confidence to lead well. Jenni is the founder and CEO of the Foresight Group, which works with individuals and teams on leadership, team culture, and strategy. She runs a leadership podcast called Jenni Catron Leadership Podcast, and Jenni's published 3 books, traveled the world as a brand manager for some of the leading Christian music artists. So, Jenni, I'm going to let you introduce yourself, and then let's kind of kick it off. So just do kind of a further introduction.
Fantastic. Daryl, thanks so much for the invitation. It's great to connect with all of you. By way of just expanded the bio a little bit, I'm based in central Wisconsin. So Pat, fellow Wisconsin person, great to make that connect. But I actually live in Neenah, Wisconsin specifically. I was born and raised in central Wisconsin, and then I went to Nashville, Tennessee. My dream job was to work in the record business. So I went to college, I graduated from Middle Tennessee State, and then got a job at a record company right out of college, and thought that was my dream job. Little did I know that actually building teams and equipping leaders was actually my dream job. But I spent about a decade in the record business, and then I went into the nonprofit space for another 12 years. And in all of that journey was really this recognition of how significant leaders are to the success of teams, and how incredibly important teams are to the success of a business mission, et cetera. And so that kind of birthed my passion for the work we do at the Foresight Group. We do one-on-one executive coaching, group coaching, and culture consulting. So helping organizations really understand how's my team engaging? How do we build a healthy culture that keeps employees, increases retention, and just helps us accomplish our purpose more significantly. So that's what I get to do now. I've been doing that for maybe 7 years later this month. And it's a lot of fun. So I love solving the people problems. That's the short summary.
Awesome. And maybe just to kind of kick off our discussion today, this aspirational healthcare movement is all about converting healthcare to be focused on building health and productivity. Too often we think of healthcare as the place to go when you break a leg, or the place to go when you have a problem. But the best healthcare system in the world has proven that by focusing on health and well-being as the goal, healthcare can cost half as much, and that's far superior at building healthy, productive workforce, which is why employers, want to offer benefits in the first place. And I think I shared this with before, but I'm going to share it with you again. As we've been working as coaches, and we've been coaching people for over 27 years all over the country, one of the greatest hurdles we have by coaching individuals is the culture in the company where they work. And it's almost like we can do a lot to support people in reaching their life's aspirations and setting goals and having to work those. But boy, so often the barrier to success is just the culture of the company they work. And I think now with a lot of the changes that have been made, people are looking to find companies where they want to really invest their career that support them in reaching their personal and professional, goals. And so I want to have today, Jenni, you shared with me some of your principles. I'd love for you to share with this group the same, your pyramid and foundation. And then I really want to have a discussion where we're hearing from Jenni, but I want everyone to contribute to today's discussion around what have you seen? What have you used? What are some of the things you've done to create a healthy, productive culture within your companies, or seen others do to create a healthy, productive culture that supports individuals both personally and professionally? So Jenni, I'm going to let you go ahead and take a few minutes to kind of share some ideas.
Sure. Thanks, Daryl. Yeah, I kind of stumbled into this idea a bit. I'm a firstborn A-type overachiever who was all about myself in the early stages of my career, just focused on what I was accomplishing. And I remember very vividly, it was when I was working at the record company, just recognizing the power of team and the power of the environment I was working with. And to just kind of make a long story short, the first team that I worked on had a fabulous culture, just highly engaged, great leadership. I knew my purpose. I knew how I was contributing, and I got up every day excited to engage and contribute to that team and that organization. And then we went through a corporate merger, and overnight, my engagement level plummeted at the company. Still the same company, but they merged two different divisions, and the culture changed overnight. And that was the first real aha for me as an employee. I was a new manager, but my scope was pretty small still. But it was that recognition of how significant culture is to an employee's engagement. And we all know this. You all have been in leadership long enough to recognize the culture matters so significantly. And that's what kind of birthed in me this idea of like, okay, what are the makings of a good culture, and how does a leader like influence that? And a couple of things have kind of stood out to me over time is that, there's a lot of conversation around culture, but there's still a lot of confusion around what really contributes to a healthy culture. You feel like sometimes you just stumble into it and you're like, okay, great, it's wonderful, don't mess it up. And then, and other times you're just in a terrible culture and you don't know where to start to help, making sense of it. And, I think a lot of times we think of, things like the lag measures like employee engagement and employee, high contribution, sense of belonging and commitment. But what I've found over time is that there are a lot more simple things that we do to kind of set the stage for culture. Like I call them the trust building behaviors that help really set the stage for culture. And that some of that early trust that we create in organizations is actually what begins to contribute to the engagement that actually influences culture in the way we want to see it. So I have a little diagram I want to share with you guys, because we use this in our culture coaching with the organizations we serve. Hold 1 second. Let me get this pulled up in the background. And this has begun to give a little clarity to organizations that start to just feel the frustration of, I don't know how or where to even begin to influence culture. And I call it the culture hierarchy of needs. This probably looks very familiar to you all when you've seen Maslow's hierarchy of human needs, right? The things we need for human flourishing. And in Maslow's hierarchy, that bottom level of the hierarchy is basic needs, that people just need: food, shelter, safety, before they can engage in anything more meaningful. And I find the same thing to be true in organizational culture, that there are very basic needs employees have. Here I list them as tools for the job, but they're really the basic needs that employees need answered so that they can engage more fully. And one of the things, Daryl, that I've loved as I've connected with you and learned more about aspirational healthcare is that you guys are like, that is like one of these like basic needs, these fundamental needs that employees have, like the things that, I'm hiring a new person on my team, and the first question she asked is, do we have healthcare benefits, right? And, so it's like, it is one of the first things employees are thinking about when they are engaging an organization. And of course, we want them all at the top of the pinnacle here. We want them feeling fulfilled and connected and, engaged, and by all the metrics that we use to define engagement. But there are so many things that we can provide at these like lower levels of the hierarchy that often get neglected. And so what we find time and time again is that the more organizations are intentional with these lower level, seemingly simple things. So these basic needs like, adequate compensation, healthcare, the basic tools, whether it be clarity of my office environment now that we're in a hybrid work structure or whatever that might be, like some of those basic questions being answered. And then they move into other elements of clarity, like, organizational structure, roles and responsibility, goals, et cetera, is kind of that next tier. And so what we find time and time again is that if these things at the lower levels are missing, that's where you see some of the greatest disengagement or the most turnover, right? Because employees are on that hunt for the things that actually just solve some of their basic needs so that they can engage more deeply or more intentionally. And so I'll pause there, Daryl, because that might spark a question or two. And I'd love to hear from folks if that resonates as well in your experiences.
Yeah, definitely. Let's open it up and just get thoughts regarding kind of that pyramid of how to create culture by, first of all, addressing those basic needs. Anybody have any thoughts?
Jenny, could you put that screen back up? Because I wanted to, yes, I have a couple of thoughts on it, but this is great. The organizational clarity, I think, is very impactful in the challenge. I know personally, I like to direct my team, but I also want to give them the opportunity to be creative and to that. And it was from personal experience. And I just share this. I remember in my very first job in the hospital business when I started was a marketing position. They didn't have any director of marketings around the country at all. And I had no book to go to. And I'll remember that my first point of responsibility was fill the hospital. I don't care how you do it, just fill the hospital. And there wasn't any organizational clarity then. I had, coming out of a different industry and into the hospital. So I, at fault, I believe, have some way replicated that in some of the personnel. I believe them, I trust them. And maybe I've not given them specific directions down to the pinpoint to be able to say, I want you to go from here to here to here, because quite honestly, I'm moving on to the other project,
right,
and I want them to take care of that. So that's my 2 cents worth. That's what I see, some challenges sometimes.
Thanks.
Yeah, I appreciate that perspective and insight, because I do think sometimes out of a desire to be empowering, like you hire a good person and and you kind of fill the role and you're moving on to the next thing. Sometimes we don't provide the level of clarity. And then what you get is either they're kind of going off doing their own thing, or they're kind of doing the bare minimum because they don't know what the boundaries are. Like, we haven't given enough clarity to, what are some of those specific outcomes we're looking for, or what are some of the benchmarks or boundaries, just figuring out, to the level of that role, what's the level of clarity that employee needs. I think Brene Brown is, famous for saying clear is kind, right? But one of the things we talk about a lot is clarity is a chief indicator of a health of a culture. The more clarity we're providing, the more confident employees can engage. And, so, you think about some of these, and that's where I say this leads to trust building, right? The more clarity we're providing, so employees understand, okay, this is what's expected of me. This is how I can succeed here. Because they're all asking that question, how do I succeed here and meaningfully contribute? And then the more we're providing that level of clarity, the more confident they're showing up in the work.
Great. Other thoughts?
Daryl, Bill here. Can you hear me?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I'm curious. In today's environment, and particularly as we've come out of COVIDville, or whatever we want to call it, and the experience that we've had over the last couple of years, are you seeing cultures change significantly? I mean, I would think, and I know with a lot of people I know, they've eliminated half their employee base or more in some cases, and you've got a lot of people that are out in the workplace that have now become, whether they were by choice or strategy or whatever, they've become entrepreneurs, or no longer working for corporations, and or corporations are struggling to find new people to come inside and work in the environment that so many others left. I'm just wondering, what sorts of dynamics are you seeing, and how are they dealing with all of that excitement?
You've hit it exactly. Like, every culture to some degree has been upended significantly over the past few years. In some cases, the cultures that were really strong and healthy you don't see as much disruption there, but by and large, most organizations have had like significant shifting in culture. And it's for a lot of the factors you named. You know, first of all, any level of turnover, which most organizations experienced a pretty significant amount of turnover, whether it was employees, you know, making a choice to relocate or, you know, change jobs because they were, you know, evaluating their work based on different priorities, or the organization having to make some adjustments in their workforce because of all of the circumstances. And so we really have, it's, you know, because every person is contributing to the culture, you know, like the larger the team, then one individual isn't having as much of an impact, but every person is shaping and influencing that culture, whether it be their direct team or the organization as a whole. And so certainly a lot of impact there. But then, you know, with the remote work, hybrid work, whatever level of, you know, I see very few companies where everybody's back in person unless it's, you know, the type of work that absolutely requires that. But they, you know, that lack of proximity has impacted culture significantly because people just aren't together. You know, that proximity breeds relationship, that relationship breeds trust. That trust shapes culture, and then the opposite of that is true. And so, you know, just to answer your question, yes, every organization I think needs to be revisiting how do we define who we are and how we work together, that's kind of my simple definition of culture, is clarity of who we are, like what, you know, what's the DNA of this organization, mission, vision, values, and then how do we work together? What are those values and behaviors that shape how we interact? Every organization, in my opinion, has got to be revisiting that because there's been so many outside influences that have pushed on culture in one way or another. And there's erosion, whether, you know, whether we're conscious of it or not. And like my encouragement to a lot of leaders is, you know, for the first few years of this, you were just reacting to strategy and how do we keep the doors open and how do we, you know, keep doing the work. And then now the culture piece is catching up to us in that we were so focused on just the strategy piece of how to keep doing our work. Now we're seeing the fallout from employees. And then you double down on that with, there's a ton of good research that's come out over the past few years about how employees have their what's important to them is shifted. Like purpose has become the most important thing to employees. Like they want to be a part of something that has meaning and purpose. And of course, compensation and all the benefits and all those basic needs are in play. But they're making bigger decisions. They're much more aware of how integrated their whole life is. And they're making higher level decisions about doing something with more meaning and purpose. And so they're asking different questions. And I think we've got to be like regrouping to say, okay, what do we look like at our best? What does healthy culture look like for us? And then how do we build a plan to really live into that? Probably answered way too fast. Sorry.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting and just sort of a secondary question to all of that. Assuming all of that's true, and I don't have any reason to believe otherwise, as employees are sort of getting their heads around all of this purpose and all of this, you know, a different vision, it dramatically affects old school thinking of healthcare. You know, the days of an employer looking at, okay, I've got 500 lives, and this is how many bodies are in the lives, and this is how I'm going to spread that risk amongst my, you know, with my reinsurance carrier, and my TPA is going to do this and this and this. Every single component of the employer's choice has changed with that kind of creative thinking that employees are thinking. And so the question of, oh, hey, do we have benefits? Yeah, but you just changed all the dynamics with all your creative thinking. And the employer, if the employer's not ready for that dialogue, I'm just wondering how they're dealing with it, or are they just tossing it up and saying, gosh, I hope we can figure it out, and let's trust Blue Cross and United and maybe they'll figure it out. And you know what I mean? I mean, I'm sure it's very creative when you get in all of that dialogue.
Yeah, that's
because people want choice. You know, all those creative thinkers want they want choice. They want, okay, wait a minute, I don't like this $10,000 deductible or $10,000 out of pocket. I don't like that. That's stupid. Let's figure out a different idea. Okay, what does that look like? The minute that all of that creative thinking starts, that's one of the first places they want to go. I find it fascinating. In your position or some of the other employers, I would find it fascinating to be in that conversation, frankly.
Yeah.
That's why I'm bringing it up. I just think it would be, I'm sure it's very fluid.
Yeah, we're still a small enough organization that it probably hasn't hit us at, to the scale that some of you might be facing some of that. So I'd be curious, Daryl, I don't know if you've heard other, dynamics around some of employees' demands on healthcare, especially in the last few years.
I certainly have some thoughts, but let me just open it up to the group. Anybody want to add their thoughts regarding that?
Gravitate toward the cheaper plan. I mean,
That's
honestly,
interesting.
we had, and when we do a review of the clients that we work with, and that you can see how people gravitate towards what is it going to cost me at the end of the day? That's what they want to know, period. Just what is it, not what I'm getting for it. I just want to know what it costs right now. Because especially when you're dealing with the younger demographic, they feel infallible. Well, this is just fine. I'll have it. And God forbid anything happens to them. But it really is, what is the bottom line to my paycheck? That's what they want to know. And unfortunately, we find in many instances that they really don't get under the weeds to find out what they're buying. You don't know. And I had an EVP for benefits tell me the other day, we didn't do a good job explaining what we were offering. And hence there's been a lot of challenges and complaints, and unless it was like, what did I do wrong? I didn't do anything wrong, and I'm getting balance billed, and I'm doing this, and this is happening. So I mean, it's a matter of communication, and as to your point, Jenny, when you're talking about value to good employees and for retention and so forth, sometimes that comes with a cost.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and if I can just jump in here, I think one of the big mistakes that employers have made in the past is that they haven't leveraged their investment in health benefits to attract and retain, and particularly retain. Because you're right, people think of health insurance and do I have benefits as if I get in trouble and I have a major thing, is somebody going to pay for it? But for the most part, I just want to worry about not having to pay very much in the first place. Well, there's enormous opportunity through health benefits to create relationships with employees where those relationships are incredibly valuable to each employee to reach their life's aspirations, which is exactly how the best healthcare system in the world built their whole system. Well, when an employee is getting an incredible benefit and a relationship through their health plan, a relationship that actually helps them accomplish their goals and aspirations in life, that's an incredible retention tool for the employer. And employers don't even think about health benefits in that scope. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for employers to not only offer relationship-based healthcare benefits, but in enrolling people through open enrollment and through no employee orientation, offer people the opportunity to build those relationships where they can have a relationship with a primary care provider that's aligned to keep them healthy, a relationship with an influencer to help them reach their life's aspirations, an influencer with someone who can navigate them through the complexities of healthcare. Those kinds of relationships through a health plan can create enormous retention power for the employer, and employers don't even often think about that. But all of that goes into building the culture of the company. And one of the things you said, Jenny, that I think was, I love your second one, which is clarity. To me, what I think of when I think of clarity, I think of, do I agree with the overall purpose of the company? Can I really capture and engage? I believe in the overall purpose of the company.
Right.
And then what is my role? And how do I personally contribute to that purpose? I think that's the clarity that's so important to building culture, is that I know my role in how the purpose of the company gets brought to the, to society. I think that clarity is incredibly important.
Yeah, that's huge. Yeah. And that's the piece that, again, the data is showing that those are the questions employees are, and, and I'm sure this varies from industry to industry, but, but by and large, they're asking, hey, how, like, do I believe in this? Do I connect with this? Is this something I want to really give energy and time and, commitment to? And so that alignment piece of that clarity around mission, vision, values of the organization, and then the employee being able to say, okay, yeah, that I align with that, but that the employer will communicate that even indirectly by, well, we say we value people, but we don't offer XYZ benefit, or, and so those different things like that really do contribute to what we're communicating about our cultures and helping employees determine, is that a place I really want to be a part of?
Right. Other thoughts from the group?
I think the hierarchy of needs, I have not seen that before related specifically to culture. So I think that's pretty cool. And Daryl, I thought that was really well said about organizational clarity. I think we've already, in our organization, our physical therapy practice, I think we've always done a good job on our mission, vision, values. But I think where we've fallen down sometimes is abdicating instead of delegating. So the people don't, similar to what Dr. London was talking about, actually, giving people autonomy, so much autonomy that we're not helping them with enough clarity. So I think that's really, really, really helpful. Yeah, so good stuff. And the other thing that you mentioned too, Daryl, I totally agree that organizations that are getting it right with healthcare are not leveraging that nearly enough. I mean, we have an organization we work with since 2014. They have lower health premiums than they did then. They have a better benefit, and they've just not leveraged that in their recruiting. And it just, I just don't understand why not. But yeah.
Yeah. Other thoughts?
I think it was interesting that the way you've got your pyramid set up, if you don't offer the right kind of health benefits, you don't even get to the organizational clarity part. You never even get there. And I think if the benefits brokers out there could get used to having those kinds of conversations with CEOs who are responsible for vision, then I think it should help them, certainly improve their relationships and get their CEO clients. Ultimately, that's who their clients are, to trust them enough to go along with the transitions that everyone knows are coming. They just don't know how to get there.
I do think, though, that people only care about their health care if they're sick. Like Daryl mentioned earlier. I mean, if I'm not sick, all I care about is what it means to my paycheck. And I think there's got to be, how do you communicate about what that benefit actually means to somebody? And I do wonder if it's about making healthcare about aspirations, goals, and relationships. I don't know. That's a tough nut, though. Where I just don't think many employers value the health benefit unless they need it. So that's the hard part there.
You're right on the money, Matthew. I mean, there's no question that, and it's the younger demographic. I talk about this. That why do we have urgent care centers? We have urgent care centers because they're not engaging with a primary care physician because they don't have time. The member doesn't have time. So I want to get it done. Now, of course, telemedicine is coming into that space as well. So there's no personal contact. It's basically those individuals who don't want to engage. They'd rather text. They'd never pick up the phone to call. They don't want to speak to anybody. And unfortunately, it is those at times that do need those types of level of healthcare because it may happen in their family, God forbid. And they're saying, oh my gosh, where do we go from here? But I think there's clarity. There has to be communication. There has to be engagement. And what, Daryl has been preaching for so long about the aspirations of a healthcare plan. What is the aspiration? It is to better engage the member, to give them the understanding of, you've got this very valuable service that's available to you as an employee, and it's something that you better understand about in order to effectively use it.
Other thoughts? If not, I have a question for Jenni. So, in your experience, how critical is the CEO in driving the culture of a company? And if you're talking to somebody who may be focused on benefits, like an HR person who can see the need for a better culture, and they have a CEO who doesn't appreciate building a culture, or may like to talk about it, but the way they do their management doesn't really carry that out. How can a person who's in a role like working for a CEO, how do you inspire a CEO to think about the impact that they're having?
Yeah, great question. To answer the first bit, a CEO does have disproportionate influence on the culture just by the level of leadership responsibility, weight of their authority, et cetera. The culture really is shaped by the entire organization, everybody who's a part of it, but the most senior leadership definitely have disproportionate influence in the CEO in particular, especially if, whatever the CEO is modeling, particularly leaders in general, but particularly the CEO, whatever the CEO is modeling is what people are assuming are the values that define the culture, right? We can say all kinds of other things all day long, but if the CEO is operating from a different, is communicating differently, then that's what people are really going to hear. To your second question about then like an HR person or somebody, that's trying to help influence and help bring awareness to the CEO. I mean, one of the things I will tell executive leaders when I'm with them is that their culture is never as good as they think it is. The higher we are in the organization, the better the air feels, and so like it's kind of that organizational self-awareness of that recognition that, we don't know what the experience is like for the rest of our employees. We might have hints, we might have some ideas, and the more connected a CEO is, or the more just curious they are and connected to the team, the more they may have a pulse on that. But there are things that just don't get to the C-suite as related to culture of like how we really do things here, how it really feels around here. And so I think that if there's a bunch of good data, Gallup's report just came out, State of the Global Workplace just came out. There's a lot of good information there. So what I would tell like an HR person or somebody who's trying to help bring awareness to some of the cultural challenges is use some of the data to kind of normalize it. I think one of the things, just frankly, as somebody whose, business is all about culture consulting, it is not an easy thing to sell because nobody wants to admit, and we do leadership and culture. Nobody wants to admit they're a bad leader. And nobody wants to admit that their culture sucks. And so like they have to be like really desperate to finally get to the place to hire us, where we're always saying, be proactive, kind of like you are, right? Like be proactive in, being a better leader and building a better team, because there's always room for improvement on these things. And, so figuring out how to normalize the challenges that teams feel, the disengagement. I think the Gallup report, it's something like 87% of employees are disengaged. Like that's a staggering number. And so almost for that, HR person or other, second chair leader to bring to the CEO, like the data says that this is like cultures had an upheaval in nearly every organization, especially over the last few years. So it doesn't feel as personal in some way that we have like not built a good team or a healthy culture, and just say, this is, all of the influences have led to these results. What if we did a deep dive here? What if we did an employee engagement survey? What if we, did some focus groups just to kind of hear, how's the team doing? What's going on? What's working? What's not working, et cetera. So I think sometimes when you can bring outside data that showcases, hey, this is a common challenge right now. And I think it would be in our best interest to actually look into it. And because the data also shows that as we are intentional with building culture and being intentional and bringing that level of clarity, engagement goes up. And so, so I think those would be some of the ways that I would address that is, really helping normalize this. This is not exclusive to us. This is actually an issue that a
Right.
lot of companies are facing.
Well, and I'd like to know if you're seeing more and more companies doing more of those measurements. I've often said that we often think of our customer as the client who receives our services, but the best brands in the world have proven that by putting their employees as their
First.
number one customer, for example, Costco, they're very clear about the fact their number one customer is their own employees.
Yeah.
And they know if they take care of their employees will take care of their members. Well, we talk about 5 stars on Google ratings. We talk about our net promoter score, and we think about it from our client's perspective. But in my mind, employers should be measuring what's the net promoter score from their own employees as to their culture,
Yes.
as to their pay, as
Yeah.
to their benefits. And nothing would really, I think, hit business leaders in the right where they need to hear it than to hear their own employees giving them feedback as to what do they think of their culture,
Right.
what do they think of the pay, what do they think of the benefits that are being offered. So I'd
Mhm.
love to hear if you're seeing more and more companies actually starting to measure things like culture and benefits and pay.
Yeah, I don't have some good hard data on that, Daryl. So it's just anecdotal. I think that it's moving in the right direction. I think that there was some good movement towards this even pre-COVID, and then for a couple of years, it all kind of came to a grinding halt while we were trying to figure everything else out. So I think the conversation is resurfacing. We're getting a lot of requests for, we think we need to do an employee engagement survey, so we are seeing an uptick in that, but it's not fair for me to correlate that because we're also just growing as a company. So I can't make a
Right.
a healthy analysis of that. But I
How
think
about
the smart
anybody
ones
else?
are.
Yeah,
you
how
know.
about others that are on the call? Are we seeing in some of your experiences within your companies or other companies more attempt to measure and monitor their own employees as a customer and how they feel about their company's culture and their company's benefits?
I'm seeing some of that with the employers that we're working with.
Good. Others?
But there's this mismatch though, in the health plan that they're offering, and we got to figure out how to poke at that as well. Where there's a study in 2022, 51% of people are putting off health care if they have a high deductible health plan, so they don't know how they're going to pay for it. So there's a big disconnect with CEOs wanting to have culture while their folks aren't able to get their health care on their benefit plan. So that's something that could be poked at by us as we're talking to CEOs.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting.
So the other question I have for you, Jenny, is I've heard it said before, employees don't leave companies, they leave managers. Talk a little bit about how important, from your perspective, it is not just to help the CEO, but how does the CEO and the overall business build managers that people want to work for?
Yeah, that's a great observation, Daryl. And I don't have the data in front of me, but I did a keynote on this earlier this year, in that especially like the younger generation, they are looking at their direct manager as the authority more so than even like senior leadership or C-suite. There's actually more of a skepticism of the higher levels of leadership, and they look to their direct manager to be the source for, just knowledge about the business, coaching and development. So there's a lot of expectation that employees put on their direct manager. And then at the same time, what we've also seen is we've seen people being thrown into more responsibilities of people management who maybe haven't done that before. And so they're also ill-equipped for that management responsibility. So one of my encouragements to the leaders that I've been speaking to is like, double down on that development and training for your people managers. because the pressure on them is more significant than ever. Like they're bearing a lot of the expectation of employees. And then they're also just not very well equipped because a lot of them have been kind of pushed into management responsibilities because of the shuffling of roles and responsibilities over the last few years. So our encouragement has been, be aware of that. So I've got some data I could find that, Daryl, and send that your way, around how much that is shifted. And then, the data still bears out. I think it was Gallup back in the 80s who did the original research. And then there's another round of that research that says, 80% of employees leave because of a bad boss. They leave because of a bad manager. And that data just continues to be true. And so I remember when I worked at the record company, when I got promoted into people management, there was a whole training program that I had to go through, and I actually couldn't officially be promoted until I went through that training program. And I thought it was kind of audacious. Like I thought this was the most crazy thing that I've ever experienced. But, they put me through training on, 7 habits of highly effective people and, just all these skills that were preparing me to be a better people manager. And now I reflect on that and I realize how unique that was, that, there's not been another company I've been a part of that had that until I got there. And then I was like, yep, we're having a training program for our new managers. So I think I would just say echo the attention on the development of your people managers is really critical to retention.
I've got a Las Vegas story for that. One of the
Should it stay in Vegas?
Yeah, one of the casinos, director of housekeeping, left and went across the street to another casino. And over the weekend, 600 housekeepers left and followed her over to the next.
Across the street.
Yeah, 600.
Wow.
Oh, that was a bad day for
power.
that company. Yeah.
It was a bad day, but you talk about the power of leadership. Now, this is, she's not in the C-suite by all means.
No.
She's the director of HR. And that's a personal connection. You look at ethnicity, you look at the dynamic of the position and so forth. And for them to follow her like that was unprecedented.
Wow, that is that is probably the most extreme story of that I've heard. But yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, and Jenni, with the work you do you often have leadership programs that work specifically with the C-suite, but then other leadership programs that work with the manager levels?
Yeah. What we've done, we'll do a lot of executive team or C-suite coaching where we'll coach the entire group, and sometimes as a group and sometimes one-on-one. And then that's very catered to the team, like we'll do an assessment of what are some of the behaviors and challenges that team might be facing in how they're working together. But then we actually started to help respond to this issue. We have something called the Foresight Leadership Institute that we started that is monthly training for people managers on a lot of just those basic skills. And so what we have, a lot of our clients will send their people managers through the Leadership Institute, and then we're able to kind of help support that with some of our other coaching. But that was one way we were looking to, because in many cases, organizations don't have the resources for one-on-one coaching for every people manager. Just that we budget one-on-one coaching for executive level, C-suite level, but and maybe some director level. But a lot of times, like that first level of people management, there's that's not a place where we're budgeting as many dollars for development, and it might be. You might argue that that's the most critical place for your people development dollars. Yeah. So yeah, we've been just doing some different things like that to help support our clients in equipping their managers.
Nice. Vidar, did you have a question or comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask Dr. London if that Las Vegas example had been written up anywhere, because I'm especially interested in blue collar workers.
Yeah. I don't know. Because we were talking the early 90s in that particular circumstance, and it was a rapid growth when one of the casinos was opening. So they recruited this director of housekeeping, and that was unprecedented by all means. I would have to go into the annals of my history of Vegas and see if I can remember where it was, but unbelievable. And they're still in that challenge with growth. If you go up and down the strip, and you will see, come visit again, and you will see a new casino, another new casino, and another new casino, and of course the dynamics of the entire town is changing. And the biggest challenge has been personnel, without exception, continuously. And when you talk about benefits, there was at one point a parity in the town, because every casino wanted to not outdo the other one, but be at least within the same parameters of parity. And I will tell you, during the economic drop down in 2008, that went out the window. That literally went out the window. You found very large organizations going to fully insured, changing their dynamics of their plan, because it was more bottom line oriented rather than at all personnel interested. It was what you're going to get. That's it, period. It's now starting to head back in a different venue. They're starting to now look once again at what are we offering, what can we offer differently, and what can we do better. And then I even have several of the casinos have been doing surveys specifically on their benefits, on healthcare, on what is it important to them. So we're going to see some dynamics changing.
Nice.
Do you remember the name of either the winning or the losing casino?
I believe the losing casino was the Imperial Palace, which is not there any longer. It's now part of the Flamingo Link and all the rest of that. And it was an expansion at Caesars. And I think that was the two that occurred.
Okay.
So we've got about just 10 more minutes, and I want to open it up. I've got another question I'd like to pose to the group, but does anybody have any questions or comments they want to add before we close up today?
I have a question for Jenni and anybody else that's figured this out. I've learned that Gen Z is really looking for, they expect their community to come from the workplace, right? And their support to come from the workplace, because they're not getting community outside of the workplace like they did. So we're trying to work on that at our company, and we try to have a company picnic, in the summer, and nobody signed up for it because of the work-life balance that they want. It's just, I was like, oh, well, what the heck? How do we crack that nut by building culture at work when people are so into work-life balance, they don't want to be at work? Yeah, it's just a very difficult thing. So any thoughts?
Yeah, that's a great observation. Yes, it's like they kind of talk out of both sides of their mouth. Like we want these things, but but don't disrupt our work-life balance. Or I wonder there if, I don't know exactly who was involved in even setting up those things, but one thing I've seen helpful with some of the teams we're working with is building a culture team that is built by team members throughout the organization. And then they're coming up with the ideas and birthing it. So it's not a top-down idea, even though it's well-intentioned, right? We're trying to do something that's just fun and connecting and so forth. I've seen some, there's a organization that I spent about a year with doing culture consulting. They built a culture team. They have about 300 employees, 350. And their culture team came up with doing a pickleball tournament, and it was a phenomenal success. They had great engagement. Everybody participated. They did a ton of fun stuff. And it was a good, connecting, culture building thing for them. So I've seen their culture team have a little bit of success doing where it's kind of bubbling up from a team within the organization rather than senior leadership. But
let
like
me
that
share
idea.
with you one of the things that some of my team have done. We have a very virtual team with people all over the country, and what they did is a number of years ago, they came up with a team meeting that's virtual once a month, and sometimes it's even been twice a month, where everybody gets on and nothing is talked about work. There is no description of work. There's no discussion of work. It's all about, and everybody comes up with their own, like one will be in charge 1 month, another person, but they'll just come up with this interesting topic. And it's like, what movies do you like? Or what kinds of books have you read recently that are really cool? Or what's it like for you to move from being a renter to an owner of a home? I mean, things that have nothing to do with work, but everybody's had some life experience with those things. And so everybody can be a part of the discussion and go around. And it creates an amazing culture virtually where nobody has to be close to each other to have that kind of experience.
That's good.
And I can take absolutely no credit for that at all.
Another team I know, they did that is mostly a virtual team, but I think it would work with virtual or in person, but they did a fun stuff channel on Slack. And it like the rules were it can't be work related. It's got to be fun stuff. So whether they're sharing pictures of their kids or they're, something fun they did this weekend or lobbing a question to each other. And it just creates like connection and chatter and stuff. And I find the more that I stay out of it, the better it is. Like I'll chime in from time to time, but I'm not an instigator of it. I let the team kind of create it. But
that's a good idea. Slack channel. That's a good idea.
Mm-hmm.
In our last few minutes, does anybody else have any questions for Jenni or comments they want to share? Well, thank you again for everybody participating. Jenni, thank you for being a part of the discussion. If anybody's interested in Jenni's contact information, do you want to share that, Jenni?
I will, yes. My email is just Jenni@getforesight. I'm going to put that over in the chat if anybody wants to follow up there. And then our website is getforesight.com. So love to connect. Awesome. If there's, anything further that we can help with or support. There's a ton of free resources on our website on culture building stuff. So, and then links to the podcast and all that fun stuff are there too. But thanks for having me, Daryl. Appreciate the conversation. Thank you all for the work that you're doing and being intentional and thoughtful about how to serve leaders well.
Well, and my end goal would be that everyone who's in a role to consult an employer on the kind of health benefits that they offer, culture would be at the top of their mind. If we truly had alignment in healthcare, where consultants who help companies build health benefits were truly aligned with the employer, helping that employer build a culture that produced healthy, productive workers, would be at the top of the mind of that consultant. And we're a long ways from that, but that would be like an end goal where consultants are so aligned with employers that culture is top of mind when it comes to benefits. With that, thanks everybody. We'll see you next month. Thanks for participating. Have a great weekend.
Hey, Daryl?
Yeah.
Could I connect with you just afterwards somehow?
Absolutely. Yeah. Just send me an email or give me a call. Just give me a call.
What? I don't know if I have your number.
801.
Oh, I won't be able to do this.
Okay.
Hey, well, are we on alone right now?
Actually, we saw a lot of people, but you know what, Pat? I will just send you an email with my contact information and just call me.
All right. Thanks.
Okay. Take care. See ya.
Bye.
Thanks, Daryl.
Thanks, Jenni.